Hey everybody again, my name is Lew Dennen. Welcome to EOXS Stories on Steel, the podcast. Today we are very fortunate to have Lawrence Tabachnick. I hope I said that right, sir.
Perfect.
All right, and Lawrence comes to us from, I hope I say this right, from 3D Metals in Ohio?
That is correct.
Awesome. And Lawrence is I hope I say it right, the head of the IT? Maybe I said that wrong.
No, I'm in charge of IT here.
All right, cool. Amongst a few other things, I'm guessing. And thank you for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
And we're hoping to have an interesting conversation on different topics. And let's begin by asking, how did you get into the steel business?
Accidentally, I suppose. I graduated with a finance degree from a school in Montreal and moved to New York since I had some contacts in the stockbroker business and thought that would be a great path for me.
Okay.
Quickly learned within 6 or 8 months that sales probably isn't where I'm going to end up, and moved back to Canada and hung out, bounced around like a lot of early 20-year-olds do, not knowing what I wanted to do.
Yep.
One weekend at a friend's house, we were just sitting around having a couple of drinks, and one of the buddies said, "Hey, is anyone looking for work?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And he said, "All right, well, the company my cousin works for is hiring." So being friends since we're little children, 5 or 6 years old, I said, "Well, I'm not going to apply if you're going to apply." And he said, "The last thing I want to do is get involved with computers." So I was open to it. It was something, and I applied. And sure enough, it was a job supporting software for the steel industry.
Okay.
And I knew nothing about the steel industry, and I had taken for granted the fact that if you turn your head in any place that you're living in, working in, walking past, there is some steel supporting a building, on a street sign, on a car, you name it, it's all around us, everywhere, every day. So that was my introduction, and I can tell you, when I first started doing support, they throw us in front of the software, and as a business student, I kind of understood the concept, purchasing, receiving, etc. So we started doing testing, and one of the first things I tested was how to process a steel coil. Not knowing anything about steel, I saw we had a 40,000 pound coil in our pretend stock. I took 2,000 pounds of it and processed it, and the boss laughed and said, "You can't do that." I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Well, a steel coil cannot just be broken apart. You need to load the whole thing on an arbor, and they have to cut it, and then you can put it back in stock, but you can't just take bits and pieces of it." And so that was kind of my embarrassing introduction to the steel industry. And once you start to dig in and understand what the customer base does and what the end users do with it, it's actually a pretty neat industry.
Wow, what a cool, so you just kind of came in by accident.
Complete accident, tripped over my own feet, landed on my face, and became a steel software consultant.
And you're still in it after all those years.
And despite, spending 10 years as a consultant, I then went into industry and started to work for steel companies and just enjoy the people, enjoy the industry. And 25 years later, I'm still here.
So let me ask you this, because I also started a little bit before, but I mean, similar stories, right? With just in terms of like the tech portion, I knew nothing really about tech. And I know that our industry, probably like every other industry, has certainly gone through, from the mailing stuff out to the fax machine, to the emails, to the computers. And certainly the fact that you've been in steel and in manufacturing, one thing I guess maybe you see it as well is the reluctance, is that a fair word, of people to want to, I don't know about change, but to sort of grab onto, tech in like any form. They hear tech and they become afraid. Let's just sell steel. And I'm wondering, have you sensed that, or how have you sensed that?
100%. I mean, people are a little more amenable to it today because we're seeing a lot of younger people come into our industry. But anybody who's my age or older, it's like pushing a giant boulder up Mount Everest to get them to adopt some technology and to really want to delve in and take advantage of it. Once they actually get their hands around it and realize it's their friend, I think we've seen a good adoption. But I think the first thing we think of, certainly I'm 49, so from my generation is, oh no, technology's coming to take my job. And what we try to teach is no, your job is just going to be different. Your same 8-9 hours in the day are 8-9 hours in the day, but instead of handwriting and licking stamps and mailing envelopes, you're focusing on customer service and relationship building, etc. So, we try to frame it that way. It's not always received that way, but in the long run, people end up being like, wow, that really is helped me and has made my job easier and allowed me to do the things I really want to do, which is interact with my customer base, which is interact with my production floor, and which is understand how to improve my process.
In the average steel company, where do you think the pushback comes from the most? Is it the salesperson? Is it the production person? Is it the above board people? Higher up people? Like, what is it? Just kind of a problem.
I think typically what I've seen is the above, the C-suite wants the technology because to them, they see the end outputs. I can get information on my phone. I can get information on the road. I can go to my vacation home and get all the data that I need to make the decisions where to drive my company. So the pushback is really from the people who've been doing the same thing every day for 15 years. Why bother changing? I know my job, and this is how we've always done it. We always hear that as the dumbest and worst statement in any business. We've always done it this way, so let's keep doing it this way. But I'm guilty of it too. Even as a technology person, I'm using Outlook, the app, and not the web 365.
Right.
I've been using Outlook for 25 years. I don't want to use the web. And so it's very difficult for me to try to sell the concept of technology when I don't want to adopt something new. So, it kind of pushes me in that direction as well.
I'm chuckling just a little because I'm similar. I'm 55, and yeah, you think I'm used to doing whatever the heck it is that I've been doing. As an example, our little company has a CRM feature. I've only ever heard of a CRM because my wife had to use it at her job, and I think it was Salesforce, which is fine. I didn't know what a CRM was because I'm used to writing everything down on my sheet, every call I ever make, and that's just how I've always done it since I was 18 years old. And suddenly it's, no, you have to actually go type, and until you start doing it and can see, oh, there is a serious benefit to this. Wow, changing the mind. I thought I was the only guy in the world that had that problem. I guess I feel better now.
It's across the board, and people come around because they have to, and sometimes technological change pushes people out into something else, and you end up replacing them with somebody who wants to do it and wants to get involved.
What do you think about, I say Chat GPT, but I use that sort of as like a generalized comment. And I don't want to be like AI, like the world's coming for us. I don't mean it like that, but what do you see in terms of that usage, even within your own business? Are people adopting it? Are you sensing we don't want to adopt it? And if they are adopting it, how is it enhancing?
I think people are open to it. I think they're scared of it because everyone's, you've seen all the robot movies back in the 80s and 90s of how they're going to take over the world, and maybe one day they will, but we're not anywhere near there.
Right.
I think we're starting to see it in a lot of places, just in terms of being able to use them as predictors, being able to use the data based on past performances and helping us try to understand where things are going. That's always been a very manual process, whether it's forecasting, whether it's purchasing, especially, what do we buy? And a lot of that intelligence is helping us understand where our customers are going. When I started here at 3D, we had very little data usage. It was very manual. So even trying to come up with a forecast of what do we buy and what are we going to be selling required us to go through thousands of pages of documentation to try to figure out, oh, this customer stopped buying aluminum and is buying more copper, or vice versa. We need to change course on how we're purchasing and how we're stocking our warehouses. So I think AI is going to help us in that way. One of the ways we've seen some technology, and it's kind of neat, at the back of our warehouse, we actually have a couple of robots that help with our packaging.
Okay.
So they know from, putting spacers on skids, helping unload coils off of a slitter and putting them into the packaging on the skids. So that's taken away a little bit of a people process for safety when you talk about nobody has to handle the metal. Accuracy, because it's always put the same way over and over and over again. So that has helped us cut costs in a lot of ways and just improve the process and allow our people, again, to do the things like inspection visually instead of, oh no, the truck is here, just shove it on a skid. Now it's safely put on a skid. It's
Okay.
accurately put on a skid,
Okay.
and when the customer receives it, it's in a way where they can get it off nice and easily and safely.
And is that so? I know that's a whole separate topic, the robotics, but I mean, even I've been watching, on LinkedIn, I watch people post videos of the robotic arms that are doing things that, we talk about hours of people doing it, but it was the accuracy and the efficiency that kind of blew me away. I'd never seen that before. And I don't know, would we call that, would we put that in the AI, or is that just in the tech world, would you say?
I think it's a little bit in the AI, because there has to be some data. The robots have to understand kind of what they're doing. And as they gain more data, they have a little bit more ability to understand that, oh, I've seen this before. And unlike myself, who forgets, I've seen this before, but I don't remember. Well, the robot doesn't have that problem because it's, just bits in its brain. And so they're able to do repetitive tasks that way after learning from a period of time.
Interesting. Do you think that, have you seen, let's say within the world of sales, the sales guys, salespeople, I say sales guys, I'm old, that ChatGPT is something that anybody there is trying to use for, I don't know, communication or emailing, whatever. Is that just kind of, yeah, whatever? I
think we're still early in that world. I mean, I know anyone who's played with ChatGPT sees it's a little bit flawed. It's cool. And if I could go back to my high school days, I would definitely take advantage of, write me a recap of Tale of Two Cities so I don't have to read it. There's some power there, and there's some generic things, but I think we still want a personal touch. And I think that everyone has their own cadence. And I think there's something we like about that human cadence as opposed to that robotic, for lack of a better word, script that'll come out of a ChatGPT or some kind of AI developed script.
I get that sense too. I'll create an email, and then I'll, just for the heck of it, put it through ChatGPT. And I've almost found that I've spent sometimes longer trying to figure out, okay, wait, what's the best version of the 19 versions it gave me, and which one's going to work?
Right. I think what it's really great for is starting things off. Like, I'm going to write a new IT policy for my company. Let ChatGPT fill in all the generic garbage and junk, and then I'll tailor it to what I'm doing. So I don't have to come up with some very basic nomenclature. It'll pull all the jargon off the internet, and it'll do what it wants to do.
All right, so there's definitely different ways. Again, I think a lot of us in the world of, let's say, the world of sales, are thinking, oh God, it's going to take my job, because people continue to shove that down our throats with and then the more I begin to use it, the more I question, and I think, no, I still have to talk to the customer. I still have to talk to the other human.
Absolutely. I think what you can glean is things like, show me all the customers that use X product, and then the ChatGPT can go and search Google or wherever it goes and give you a list. That list would have taken you a day or a few hours to compile. Mm-hmm. So now you've got a starting point that you really didn't have to do a lot of work for, but the actual legwork you still have to do. You're not going to put ChatGPT on the phone, right, and call your customer and try to understand their needs. We're not there yet.
I can appreciate that. What do you sense that the younger generation, and I don't even know what to call the younger generation, let's say under 30, who comes into an industry, are they far more tech savvy or far more willing to adopt the tech just because of their age? Or do you think it depends on the industry they're coming into?
I think they are. I mean, a big help for me is the younger salespeople that we've just put in place over the last year. They come in and they can troubleshoot a lot of the nonsense issues that somebody like myself back in the day would have never been able to do. Just because, when I went to high school, my kids laughed at me, but we had one computer. And then when I went to college, you could only get an email if you were in the engineering group or if you knew somebody in that group. Yes. So I didn't have an email until I started in technology in the late 90s. Now, sure, could I have got an AOL account or something? I probably could have, but it wasn't something of interest to me. Now everybody has an email account. Everybody knows how to navigate their phones. Everyone knows how to do those kind of things. So from an IT perspective, I don't have to support that stuff unless we're dealing with somebody my age group or older. Right. How do I get my company email on my phone? They don't know how to do that, but I've never had to tell anyone under 30 how to do that.
They just immediately know, and they may just immediately do it.
That's it. They sometimes can pitch in and help.
Do you think that a company out there, whether it's in the industry, the steel business, or other companies, do you think that a company not I don't want to say up to speed on tech, but sort of embracing these new technologies. When a younger person comes in to look to hire in, well, is that part of, do you think, their decision-making process? They want to look and see how, I don't want to say new the company is, but you kind of see where I'm going with that. I'm wondering if that's
I think there's no doubt, especially in this industry where people think about the steel industry and they're like, I don't want any part of that, because what they do is old and not interesting. And what they don't understand is what we do is quite actually developed and diverse and can be quite interesting, especially when you start to get into all the uses. I mean, you talk about electric vehicles, talk about charging stations, talk about power grids. That's high-tech stuff, and we're all over that from a copper and aluminum standpoint. But nobody thinks about that. You don't think about the metal that goes into a transformer that's moving electricity around, and think about all the demands we have for electricity these days. So, as a young person, I think it's hard. I think our schools do a very poor job of explaining these kind of things to us. Again, maybe it's changed, but I haven't seen it with my kids where they say, here's why you want to learn physics. Excuse me. Back in the day, I didn't want to learn physics. Why am I playing with a slinky? Why am I putting drops in a little wave pool? Nobody told me why.
right.
Well, if you understand the end uses of those, that becomes a lot more interesting. And I think the same concept happens with the steel industry. I think with welding, with a lot of those kind of professions, we don't understand it. And then until we see it or get involved, we're like, that's for a prior generation. And it's not true.
You brought up a really interesting point. I think people listening will clue into this, because a lot of us do have kids and a lot of us have kids in school. You brought up a fascinating point, which is the schools don't, across the board, seemingly want to explain why this stuff is important. Have you sensed that with your own family? I've sensed it with mine.
I have. I think the classes that they offer are much more interesting and diverse than what I was given back, in the 80s. But there's still a lot of times where my kid's like, why? I'm never going to use this. And you might say that, and some of it's true. You're not going to go back to U.S. history and be like, oh, I remember all my Civil War stuff, so I'm going to put it into practice. Now, if you're a teacher, you will. Right. But if you're in business, you're really not going to do that. But I'll never forget, I said Venn diagrams are the dumbest thing I've ever heard of, and I'll never use them. Well, I write SQL code all day, every day. So I was dead wrong, and I had no foresight and really no way to have the foresight when I was learning that stuff. So, but again, if somebody would have had some ability to say, hey, here's how you can use this stuff, it might have piqued my interest earlier, or it might have, completely pushed me away from it, but at least I would have understood why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I don't want to harp on education because that's a rabbit hole we don't want to go down. But I think the why is really important, and I don't know that we get enough of it.
Do you think our industry, and again, I say steel, let's call it the metals industry, which is encompassing. Do you think we do a good enough job? I don't know about advertising out there to that generation, to, like you explained. And people that I've been talking to on the podcast, because people I'm talking to in general, we're all saying the same thing. This is a fascinating industry. There's some cool stuff going on. Yet, how do you get that younger generation to not think, well, they have to go online and start an online business and make a bajillion to become Zuckerberg, but we're actually a good industry and you can make a good living. And I'm wondering if it's not starting at even the school level by saying, here's why you're doing some of this stuff. Are we doing enough in this industry to
We probably aren't. I know I don't really advertise, even when I talk to my kids. Like, what do you do all that? Oh, we're just a steel processor and we move metal around. And they're like, okay, whatever. Thanks. Good luck for you, Dad.
Thanks, Dad.
Good career choice, Dad. But I think we should do more. I think we are, certainly locally here in Ohio. There's push on manufacturing, obviously. And we're trying to get to local community colleges, et cetera, for them to have their kids understand that this is a viable career path. We host high schools. We do career days here. So some of the younger kids at local high schools can kind of see what we're up to and what we're doing and get a feel for, oh, there's just a transformer sitting on a pole, or there's a computer, or there's an electric vehicle. They don't really think about all the stuff under the hood and what goes into all that. And this kind of helps them get a little bit of a better grasp. We're not a discrete manufacturer, so you got to be able to have a little imagination when you see us load a coil and cut it.
Right.
But it does give you an idea of where this stuff starts from and why we're here and what is needed here. Engineers, obviously machine operators. People give a lot of machine operators a bad rap as, oh, they're just machine operators. Trust me, go look at a slitter and try to run that thing. You can't.
No.
That's a job that is an art and a science, and those guys are extreme professionals. And I think they get a bad rap, and I don't think we promote that kind of thing enough. And there's a lot of things you can get out of this industry that are super interesting and super fun.
I think I remember going into tool and die manufacturers and watching how they would make these tools and sitting back and just, you're right, initially until you understand it, and it's a dirty job. No, when you watch these artists pull this stuff off and you think, how cool is that? But I kind of grew up in the industry. And so I've often wondered, my kids do ask me too, Dad, what do you do? And I explain, I'm in the steel business. Yeah, okay. So
even when it comes to maintenance, that's one of the biggest shocks I had when I got into the industry out of the software business, is how important the maintenance, the upkeep. It's no different than oil change on your car. We've got a maintenance crew here that builds things from scratch. We just moved a 27-inch slitter down to Mexico for an operation there. We built a lot of that from scratch, and a lot of the components we couldn't get because it was an old machine that we refurbished. These guys are geniuses, building out all the electrical components, some of just anything that has to go onto a slitter, which I'm obviously not qualified to talk about, but they built an entire machine from scratch. And some of the challenges of getting that across the border, having to have serial numbers on parts we created, is a different kind of challenge. But just conceiving of how we put together a slitter from scratch, shipped it, built it up, tested it, tore it apart, rebuilt it, thousands of miles away, is fascinating. And that's a career path a lot of people don't realize, it is not only lucrative, but incredibly mentally challenging to come up with the design and actually executing on that design. And, this is a dangerous business. So if you make mistakes, people get hurt, and you got to be real precise and real detailed. And there's some real engineering skill involved. And it's been an impressive project to follow.
So I'm so curious. So you currently are at 3D Metals. And did I read right? Valley City, Ohio?
It's in Valley City, Ohio.
Kind of near Cleveland for those of us geographically challenged?
Yeah, it's 30 minutes south of downtown Cleveland.
Okay.
Just outside of Cuyahoga County, if that means anything to anybody.
Sure. I know where Lake Erie is.
Yeah.
For 2 seconds, give us 2 seconds, not without getting too much into the weeds. What does 3D Metals do?
So we are a steel service center. We both have a ferrous division, so we sell carbon steel. A lot of that goes into automotive, high carbon and low carbon steel. And then we've got a non-ferrous side to our business, which copper, aluminum, stainless. I guess stainless is kind of in between. We do some bronze and brass. And we do a lot of supply for transformers, for anything to do with e-vehicles and electronic charging power stations. We're very involved in power grid, so a lot of bus pipe and bus bar. That's the stuff that goes to substations that moves your electricity, from the substation to the neighborhoods.
Okay.
Just kind of a very wide range of steel product. We're a flat roll house here in Valley City, which means we take coils, we slit them, and we actually do some oscillate stuff, which is a little bit complicated. And then we've got a long products division that is in Alabama and Missouri, North Carolina. And we sell a lot of copper bar, aluminum bar, tube, pipe, all that kind of fun stuff.
Okay.
And customer base across the country. Very diverse.
Good grief.
Yep.
How many people are at the company?
We're about 175.
Wow. It's a lot. And your job is to keep all of that happily functioning and running.
Yes, I am the lucky IT manager, and I get to see all of our sites and get involved with all the computer and software technology across the business. So
tell us a fun story about a situation that happened, just for the heck of it, because I think people would be interesting. You're kind of in the fingers and the pulse of everything, because it has to be. Tell us about an interesting, exciting situation that happened with you.
Well, let's see. Well,
I see the wheels turning already.
Here's one that I don't think it's exciting, but I got a call from our St. Louis operations manager, and he said that their internet was down. So we go through the regular rigmarole, troubleshooting. Everything looks up. We call our internet provider, and they're like, "No, we can get a signal." So I booked a flight down to St. Louis and started doing some testing with my MSP, and It turns out that our internet service provider changed our public-facing IP address, which basically breaks every connection that we have to that facility. They never told us. So yay to Spectrum, if I can say yay to Spectrum. We called them, they're like, no, here's your IP address. And we cross-referenced that to what was in our firewall. And sure enough, they didn't match. And 3 down days. And, those providers don't really care, especially because it's a cable connection. So there's no real, service level agreement. And we were down for 3 days. So not funny, but sort of funny. And that's kind of, those things turn up any day, every day.
Wait, so that means that, so tell me, so your St. Louis facility was essentially offline?
Completely offline.
Could they function? Could they ship? Could they?
Fortunately,
I mean, how do you keep going with that?
Well, fortunately, our current ERP system is so old that a lot of it is still paper driven.
Okay.
So we were able to do a lot of our work manually. You still have the ability to use your phone as a hotspot. So we had the general manager hotspot, and then he could get his emails. So we were able to kind of go that route and at least see what was going on, keep the orders flowing, using your phone to make phone calls, getting the trucks in and out of the building. But yeah, kind of a nightmarish, bizarre scenario.
And all that done because the internet provider, Verizon or whoever the hell it is, decides to make a switch and doesn't tell anybody, thus costing you guys essentially money.
That is correct.
And is there anything any of us can do to prevent that? There's really nothing you can do, is there?
Not really. I mean, maybe shame on me for not communicating as well with them, but they shouldn't. They should not be doing that. That is something, if they're going to do, they need to give us advance notice, because obviously we have changes that we have to make internally to keep all of our connections alive. We are one of the many people that has a cloud ERP provider, so therefore they have to make changes on their end as well when we change a public-facing IP. So it was quite a few moving parts, but sure enough, we made the changes in the firewall. Our vendor made the changes, and miraculously we were back online, and life is good again until it's not.
Until it's not. Oh my gosh, those are things that I don't really, I guess those of us out in the world don't think much about, that behind the scenes stuff that we just assume we turn the thing on and it works.
Right.
I don't mean like electric, and it just sort of functions. And I think people don't necessarily always appreciate, they think the IT person, right, is kind of like the accountant, right, very quiet, but no, you're very interesting, and you're, everything about the steel business. And I think that makes you really unique in terms of, it's first of all, it's fun to talk to you. And secondly, you know a lot about this. And so I can imagine, when things happen, you got to get really frustrated. Like, no, this is all supposed to function.
I mean, we're kind of like the offensive line, right? If you don't hear from us, life is good. But once they start calling our name, that means there's something really bad and really awful going on. And it becomes, the target of everybody. How come it's not up? When's it going to be back online? And a lot of it, especially when it comes to the internet, if your internet's down, unfortunately these days, there's so many parts of that. It could be internal, it could be external, it could be, one provider is a backbone, but there's the last mile provider, and they got to talk to each other. And, and let's face it, if you talk about technology, those are real life jobs too, where lines get cut, things break. You need real people to go out there and fix these things. Well, we live in Ohio. It gets cold, it gets icy, it gets messy. Internet lines go down and they're underground and it's minus 20. Well, yay, someone has to break the ground, get down there, get through the conduit, fix a fiber line. It's not a 1 minute process, and none of us really, even at home, oh, my TV went out, why can't I watch the game? Well, the internet's down, and that somebody has to actually go and fix that. So something else, we just take for granted, just like flipping on a light switch. It goes on, it goes on.
Correct. Do you, on a personal level, sense that your kids have any interest in following dad into the industry at some point?
I don't think so. I don't know. They're kind of far away from it. I've got older son, probably play football in college and study business, whatever that means. And the younger son, I think, wants to be a therapist, kind of help other people out. So I don't think we've got a lot of people following in the footsteps, but who knows? And I want them to forge their own path and, this was accidental on my part. So I don't know that if you had a redo, you do it again. Who knows?
It sounds like a good accident.
Yeah, it worked out. I can't complain.
I mean, if you had and I'll just ask you this kind of like as a last question, right? It's kind of a personal thing, but you seem incredibly happy with what you're doing and where you are. Do you, in 10, 15 years, do you still see yourself in the steel business, or do you see yourself evolving into something else, or like what's on your plate?
I really love software systems and process. And so if at some point that meant moving on from here and doing something different, I would, but I'd always want to be involved with the software process. I just like the people interaction, and as crazy as it is, the support interaction and dealing with vendors and kind of learning new techniques and just new tricks.
I love that. Anything you want to share with the audience beyond that?
No, give the steel industry a break, and appreciate the fact that these are a lot of hardworking individuals that make our everyday lives a lot easier. Again, we talked about lampposts and racks in grocery stores and cars and all the other stuff that steel's involved in. It's not going away, and I think it should be kind of promoted a little bit more than what it is.
I was at a conference about a month ago down in Atlanta, walking around talking to people, and you could kind of sense that I think the median age probably had to be 50. People our age, maybe older, and you just didn't see a lot of people under 30. And I kind of sensed, we've got to do something. I agree with you, Lawrence. We've got to do something to let people know this is a cool industry. It's unique. It uses your brain. It uses your mind. It uses your creativity. And there's a lot of good people just making a living. And
absolutely.
How we get that message out, I guess, is going to be a challenge for all of us.
I think so. I think we're trying here. We've got a lot of young people that we take to trade shows, and a lot of young people that we're trying to put as more of the face of the company. And they're the ones driving our LinkedIn, and they're the ones driving our advertising campaigns and our internet, whatever it is, website and the other things that we do. It's the only way, I think, is to try to continue to get it into schools and get people to understand manufacturing is a good career and it's a necessary career. And as we bring more and more of it back onshore, we're going to need more and more people to get involved.
Amen. Couldn't have said it better. This has been a fascinating and fun podcast interview. I hope you had a good time.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and I did. I had a much better time. I was nervous about what we'd be talking about and how it would come over, but I think I had a good time.
Look, we both look old. No, we can't fix that. We cannot fix that. All right, I'm gonna do my outro. Hang tight with me. Thank you again for joining us on our podcast today with Lawrence Tabachnick. Thank you very much for spending time with us and giving us your insight.
I appreciate you guys having me.
So we will see you on the next one. If for any reason you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, please hit me on my email address. Find us on the site. You'll see links. Let me know. I'd love to host you. So thanks. And until next time, we'll see you.